prominent American scholar, a 58-year-old black man with 50 honorary degrees to his name, a MacArthur Genius Grant. Director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute for African and American Research at Harvard, came face-to-face in his home a week ago today with a 42-year-old white man, a police sergeant with 11 years on the job in one of America's most liberal cities, Cambridge, Massachusetts, who has spent the last 5 years at the Lowell Police Academy teaching how not to racial profile, a job for which he was selected by a black police commissioner. Then, in our fourth story tonight, the nation's first black president weighed in on a story about black and white that was never black and white, and the right wing started salivating. Professor Henry Louis Gates returned from overseas last week to find his front door stuck shut and got his driver to help open it. A neighbor called police saying two black men were trying to break in. Sergeant James Crowley responded after the driver left, after Gates got in. Not knowing whether Gates was a burglar or whether burglars remained inside, Crowley asked Gates for his ID, which Gates initially refused. Then it got ugly. Gates accusing Crowley of racism, allegedly talking about Crowley's mother, later claiming Crowley refused to identify himself, something Crowley claims Gates could not hear because Gates would not stop yelling. Crowley arrested Gates for disorderly conduct. He spent 4 hours in lockup with charges dropped this week.
What it made me realize was how vulnerable all black men are, how vulnerable all people of color are, and all poor people to capricious forces like a rogue policeman. And this man clearly was a rogue policeman.
The charge of racial profiling flew. Last night, Mr. Obama was asked about it.
I don't know, not having been there and not seeing all the facts, what role race played in that, but I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly in arresting somebody when there was already proof that they were in their own home. And number three, what I think we know separate and apart from this incident is that there is a long history in this country of African Americans and Latinos being stopped by law enforcement disproportionately. And that's just a fact.
That got back to Sergeant Crowley.
You probably have heard what the president had to say last night, and I just wonder what your thoughts are concerning his comments.
I didn't vote for him.
When he said the Cambridge police acted stupidly, he was talking about you. What was your reaction to that?
My only reaction, somebody had told me what he said. I didn't hear the press conference, but I did listen afterwards, and I support the President of the United States 110%. I think he's way off base, wading into a local issue without knowing all the facts, as he himself stated before he made that comment.
Congressional Republicans emailed news releases demanding that Democrats distance themselves. And, of course, eternal white victim Rush Limbaugh cried racism.
Last week, we saw white firefighters under assault by agents of Barack Obama and Sonia Sotomayor. We're talking about Frank Ricci and the boys from New Haven. They were under assault during the Sotomayor confirmation hearings. You remember that? Groups went out there trying to destroy these guys. Now, white policemen are under assault from the East Room of the White House by the President of the United States, after admitting he didn't know all the facts what went on in there.
Never mind that one firefighter was Latino, or that Sergeant Crowley was on scene with a Latino officer and a black officer. Today, Mr. Obama had words of praise for Sergeant Crowley's record, but suggested Gates should not have been handcuffed and said more broadly that the whole thing is a distraction.
Terry, I think this is a classic example at a time when we're struggling about health care, energy. We've got two wars going on, that issues like this get elevated in ways that probably don't make much sense.
Let's bring in Chris Cillizza, a White House reporter for the Washington Post and author of the paper's political blog, The Fix. And Chris, good evening.
Good evening, David.
President Obama not only said the police acted stupidly, he also said, quote, any of us would be pretty angry. I wonder whether any white person would also be pretty angry at Sergeant Crowley's behavior, or whether some white people might feel less threatened because whites do not have the same history with police.
Well, let me take a cue, at least from the first part of what President Obama said, and say I can't comment really about the racial element of this, simply because not being there, obviously I followed this pretty closely, but not being there, I don't want to get into it. But I think the political mistake that the president made here, David, was he had it right when he said, I don't know all the facts here. He could have said, look, Professor Gates is a friend of mine. I support him, and you know, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to turn out, but I broadly support him. Instead, he gave a much longer answer after that caveat that I think probably got him into this political hot water where we find him.
Do you get the sense that Mr. Obama considers issues around race and police the distraction, or, as you put it, just the tempest over his use of the word stupid?
I would bet the latter is what he thinks right now. I think this whole press conference, David, was aimed at health care, driving the health care message. It's urgent. We need to do it. It needs to happen now. Every question except one prior to that last question asked by the Chicago Sun-Times Lynn Sleet was about health care, and the other question was about the economy. That last question, when he said acted stupidly, look, Barack Obama didn't get elected president because he is a bad politician. I am certain he knew that when he said that, he would have liked to take it back.
Politically, the right-wing condemnation of President Obama seems strange when you consider the libertarian view of government agents who go into your home. If the homeowner had been a prominent white man and the president had been asked about it and chose not to express outrage, wouldn't conservatives and libertarians have hammered Mr. Obama?
Probably, but that's politics, David. remember, you know, maybe I see these things through too political a sphere, but that's sort of the lens that I look through in my daily life. This is politics. The Republican Party hasn't had a lot to distract the public from some of these broader issues. This is a way to say, look, health care has slowed. Harry Reid has put off the vote until September now. Now you've got this issue. All of these things are moving around, and what it does, it muddles the White House's message. Any day that Republicans who are out of power at the White House, out of power in the Senate, out of power in the House, can muddle the White House Democratic message, they have to consider a good day from a purely political perspective.
There is something a little poignant here and possibly revealing about our country. A black man obviously felt threatened by the presence of an armed, uniformed white authority figure in his home. It's easy to imagine the white sergeant now feels somewhat under siege as well, with his black mayor, black governor, and black president all now condemning his actions. Politically, what should Mr. Obama do with this dynamic now?
You know, I think, David, what he has to hope for is that we don't spend another day or two talking about it, to be totally honest with you, that this essentially goes away, that the police officer doesn't talk more to the media, that the issue goes quietly away and we move back to health care. If it stays in the limelight, if it comes out that this was, in fact, that the police officer was doing the job that he has been trained to do, then you get into more shaky and more tenuous political ground for the president. But what he wants right now more than anything is to start talking about health care. Even if we start talking about the fact that the health care bill vote has been delayed until September, he'd much prefer that than to this conversation.
Chris Cillizza, The Washington Post. Chris, thanks as always for coming on.
David, thank you.
You're welcome.